You're listening to episode 82 of the D6 podcast.
Here's the encouragement I give you. The shortest distance between your child's heart, your grown child's heart, and Christ is you.
Parents need to own that they are the primary disciplers of their child.
Our goal in parenting is not for our kids ultimately to get a great education, as good as that is. Our goal is not for them to be great athletes. Our goal is not for them to go on great dates and find a great husband or a great wife. Our goal is not for them to have a great career with a great job, making great money. Our goal is for them to love a great God.
You're listening to the D6 podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
This is the family ministry podcast that helps you connect the church and home. How are you doing today, Mr. Ron?
I'm doing well, Jeremy. How about yourself, my friend?
You know, I'm doing good. Yesterday, I sat with a mentor of mine. He's raised 4 teenagers, and of course, I'm entering the parenting teenager world. So I heard him say this phrase to me a couple of times. If I had to do it all over again, I would. And I don't know about you, but that perks my ears.
Oh, it does.
Every time. It speaks to wisdom and experience. And that's what we're going to have with our guest today, Mark Jones.
Absolutely. You've done what I've done. I don't have all the answers. I try to find people a little further down the road, finding somebody who's been through what we've been through and learn from it. And so what was a nugget that this mentor gave you that you thought, okay, share it with our audience.
Okay, I can do that. Well, for one thing, my son has gone from a smaller, almost like a private school. It wasn't, but it had that vibe, to the second largest middle school in the state of Tennessee. And so he's gone from order to chaos, and he doesn't handle that well. So one of the things he was talking to me about was, my son's name is Campbell. He said, you need to create Team Campbell, where he can find and ask if you can be on Team Campbell first, and then help him identify some teachers and coaches that he trusts, and then some friends that he would trust. And then once you identify Team Campbell, take him out for burgers, pay for it, don't be cheap at all, go buy the burgers, go to the ball game, you sit in the stands, let them go run, and do that regularly, and help Campbell develop Team Campbell so that he can find some order in the chaos. And that was huge for me. We have already begun the recruitment of Team Campbell.
So who sits on the team? Who do you look for on that?
Well, he's chosen his basketball coach.
Yeah.
He's chosen 2 of his teachers. Not all of his teachers to him are trustworthy.
Yeah.
And obviously he's allowed my wife and I to be on there. And then he's got about 4 guys and then 1 girl that he's grown up with that goes to the school. And those 5 kids are the ones that he would say, share his values, that he would say are people that are safe for him, that when he's around them, he doesn't feel that chaotic feeling. And so it's a centering thing, basically, and so huge wisdom.
I love how you've got peers and adults, in that mix, and teaching him how to reach out, and that's awesome.
But we are dangerously close to going into a whole other topic here. So, but let me go back to Mark Jones and say this: the way I structured that interview with him, because if you go to his website, Mr. Mark's Classroom, you'll see that he has been in ministry forever, and he's just got tons of great wisdom. So I just wanted to have one of those moments with him. I wanted to have one of those, hey, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do? And he just bolts out a list in this interview that is like, I wish every young minister heard it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's the kind of stuff that gets you in trouble on a staff, and he helps you avoid a lot of trouble if you listen to it.
You're right. I had one of those moments with Mark, and if he knew I were saying this, and I get that he's going to be listening now that, we're saying this, but I was sitting in a conference earlier this year, feels like last year, earlier this year, and these guys would hate it if I described it this way, but it's almost like a small club. But these are the mega church children's pastors in Southern Baptist. And, Randall House was invited in as a resource provider along with other people who weren't the only ones. And they get together because they say that they have a unique community because of the scale or the size of their children's ministry is different than the average church. And so they can collaborate together. And in the midst of this big group, Mark was leading a discussion, and one of the other leaders said to the rest of the group, you guys do know that this is Mark from Mr. Mark's classroom. And there were 3 or 4 like in the room of going, no. I mean, and all of a sudden his credibility, he was already super strong, but his credibility went through the roof. And so if you're listening and you're not familiar with Mr. Mark's classroom, you need to know this guy is a teacher of teachers, a teacher of ministry leaders. And he's no small fish in this ocean here by no means.
And I want to talk to my youth ministers. Please don't check out on this interview because, again, he is talking in general about working on a staff or on a team with other ministers and how to do that well. It is totally worth your time. We're also going to hear today from Yancey Arrington. What's he going to be talking about?
Well, one of the areas in ministry is we have a lot of teachers who seem to want to do their own thing. Hey, I get to pick my curriculum. I get to pick this. And he's very protective of the people in his church. And one of the topics he travels and speaks on quite a bit is how do you select a gospel-centered curriculum? How do you know? You don't want people going off and doing their own thing. We don't practice the book of Judges when we teach, in small groups, life groups, Sunday school. There needs to be some cohesion. There needs to be some intentionality. And he walks us through that.
Now, before we jump into those, I know everybody's all antsy, wanting to hear it, and I get it. I do too. But there is, for some of my family members, their favorite national holiday is coming up, which is Black Friday. They don't even care about Thanksgiving.
Yeah. That's right.
Which I personally love the food of Thanksgiving. I could care less about Black Friday. But D6 has got a Black Friday deal that before we get too far into this, I want to make sure nobody misses it. So get out your calendars and listen to Ron. He's going to talk for a second about what they're going to be doing for D6 Leader on Black Friday.
That's right. Black Friday. Everybody wants a deal. They want a sale. Well, this one, we can do it without crowds, so you don't have to stand in line out in the cold. And so come to d6leader.net.com. Either one works. And you're going to get a special that one day for $39. It's normally $49. You get everything. You get the subscription to the whole service. And by the way, that has doubled this past year in subscribers. It's been phenomenal, its growth. And if you subscribe on Black Friday, we're going to give you a new release by Dr. Ken Coley, Teaching for Change. This is a book that you really want every one of your teachers to be reading. Specifically written for teachers of teenagers or students, but the principles are across the board and apply that. You get the free book, and you want to sign in and do that on Black Friday.
Perfect. Well, now it's time to jump into Mr. Mark's classroom for just a second. After the break, we're going to be talking to Mark Jones all about the wisdom of serving together on a team, leadership tips that ministers can use every day.
Do you ever feel as if you spend so much time doing the work of the ministry that you never actually minister to people? Wouldn't it be great if you had a little help with your ministry to-do list? What if you already had 2 training emails for your volunteers each month along with a fully produced video that drove the point home? What if you were able to share nearly every main stage talk that has ever happened at the D6 conference with your ministry team? Imagine having a ministry coach pour into you personally each month. What if we gave you a resource that you could give to parents in your ministry to have tough conversations around life's difficult topics? This is the kind of stuff they can really use, and they'll be grateful to receive. When you become a member of the D6LN, we immediately make your life easier. We help you with your weekly event, teacher training, family ministry, parent helps, and your own personal ministry helps. The D6 Leader Network is going to give you content, coaching, and community throughout the entire year. The D6 Leader Network makes awesome easy. Just go to d6leader.net to give it a try today.
Well, our guest today is Mark Jones, and he's about to take us to Mr. Mark's classroom.
That's
we'll
right.
talk about that more in a second. He's the children's pastor of Quail Springs Baptist Church in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. He enjoys speaking all around the nation to train children's ministry leaders and parents. He's the founder of Mr. Mark's Classroom, which is an online leadership development and teacher resource company. He helps overwhelmed children's ministry leaders get clarity, confidence, and the resources they need to win at reaching kids for Jesus. That's a great bio, man. Good job.
Thank you. That's my hope. God called me to champion kids ministry, and so I'm going to try my very best at whatever resources, whatever media outlet I can find, so we can all do our very best.
Sounds good. And you're going to be working here. I guess when I went through your blog, I just saw tons of wisdom.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
and,
thank you, Jeremy. That's nice.
And you are speaking on the subject ministry every day, and it was full of practical wisdom that I had to ask you to share. I wanted some more. And so if you're listening to this, if you're a minister, this is going to be gold for you. This is going to be the kind of stuff that keeps you from getting fired, that keeps you out of drama, that keeps you relationally healthy, that keeps you being a good staff member and a team member. So please start taking notes now. And I want to speak to my youth ministers listening. Don't judge Mark because he's in the kid men world. This man is about to talk about being a healthy staff member, which all of you need as well. So let's all digest this. I always have to say that. Whenever I have a youth ministry speaker, I need to talk to my kids ministers. I need to say,
There's wisdom. Yeah.
Let's love everybody. Let's love everybody.
Let's learn.
All right, so let's get started. You said we need to know our leadership as an extension of the pastor. What does that mean? Tell us more about that.
Now, listen, in the Bible, it says some were to be apostles, some evangelists, some pastors. And when we look at that, it doesn't ever say children's pastor. It doesn't say student pastor. It just says pastor. And so when we see our role, we have to know and understand we're an extension of our pastor. Now, he is limited. He can't be spread so far, and the church recognizes that. And so they brought you in as a specialist pastor under his leadership. So the idea that we are a follower leader at the same time, it's a calling, it's a special place, and it's hard to even wrap your mind around it unless you're in it, that you're a follower and a leader. You're just an extension of him. We represent him. Well, obviously we represent the Lord, but we represent our pastor. So whenever someone says to me, I want to go serve at that church, but they don't have a pastor yet, I say, wait, put on the brakes. You've got to know that you can reflect the pastor's heart in order to do a great job in that ministry. So it's going to start with your relationship with him.
Gosh, that's good. So next is that we need to be supportive of other staff members and never jealous. So what do you mean by that? Give us some good examples.
Okay. Now, jealousy is that green monster that comes over us. And if we're not careful, it will absolutely sabotage us. It will bring out anger in us. It will cause us to react. And often it'll be ungodly. And we need to be careful that when we're working with other ministries, that we don't compare ourselves to them. Because even if you were looking at preschool ministry and children's ministry, they are so different. Early childhood learners are vastly different than elementary. And so compare that to student ministry, compare that to adult ministry. They're so different. I know we all meet in the same building. I know that we all teach the same Bible, but there are methods and there are activities and there are things that we're all going to do that are very different. And so if you think the youth ministry is getting everything and you're getting nothing, it's because they're different things. And we've got to start appreciating what another ministry is doing on this legacy path that we're on. And so when you can start to appreciate what they're doing, and listen, the true sign of this will be when you're able to say to that person, I'm so glad for you. I'm glad for you that you got this date. I'm glad for you that you got all the transportation at the church. I'm glad for you that you got the calendar dates. It may mean that you need to start working farther ahead. It may mean that you need to start working in tandem with them so that you can share the resources and not be oppositional all the time. It's something you need to step in with leadership. And maybe you'll have to ask that of the other ministers. But if you let jealousy step into this, then you're definitely going to bring anger, which could lead to bitterness. And really, there will be no room for that. You won't have a place.
I remember I was in the age-graded ministry, and in the church I was at, there was a creative department. And I was super jealous of them all the time. I was like, man, y'all just get to sit back and come up with nifty video ideas, wear skinny jeans, and drink coffee. And I'm busting my hump over here, right?
Right.
So I broke that rule. So I'll listen to Mark. Don't listen to me. That's good. All right. So another one is to speak of our loyalty for our pastor and to support them publicly.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Well, I think whenever you are working with your own leadership. You've got a whole group of people that you are inspiring, you're training, you're equipping them, you're following up with them, you're loving them. And when they hear you say things like, wow, wasn't that message incredible? I just love our pastor. I mean, he knows how to preach. When you say, I appreciate that he's leading us in this theme this year, and so we're going to hold back with these ideas so that we are staying in tune with him. And when they hear you supporting him, then they're going to refrain from trying to get away from the rest of the flock. You've got to lift him up, and you've got to speak that of how and why you appreciate and love him. And the truth is, you may not like a decision that he made, but you probably don't have the whole story. You're not clued in to everything that's going on. He has a lot more details, and you're going to have to trust him. And so it goes back to, you're an extension of the pastor, and you need to be able to trust him so that you can follow him and what his heart is for the church, and then be able to lead out in that.
All right. So what about this next one's pretty big because this.
Okay.
We need to be attentive in staff meetings, giving attention and contributing as needed. I know what you're about to say, and I totally agree with you on this.
Absolutely. You cannot take that cell phone out of your pocket.
Yeah.
It's got to stay in there. You need to go into a staff meeting ready to hear. Now, we all are worn out on meetings. If we didn't have so many meetings, we could get more done. But the truth is, we're loaded up on meetings. And I've even pushed in to say, hey, could we get these meetings on the same day? So at least we could burn one day and be able to accomplish all that. That way we're not interrupted with all the other things during the week. And you know what? It was great to align it. And we even cut back on some of those and thinned them out because we all agreed we were really meeting ourselves to death. Mm-hmm. So when you go to a meeting, you should go in with your tablet, if it's going to be digital or paper, your pen, and sit down and look at whoever it is right in the eyes, and you start taking notes. Because if you're going to be ready to write, you're going to be ready to put to work whatever it is that's being said or discussed. They'll have to bring whatever it is that needs to be done. Okay, here's a little scenario. I had a meeting, our pastor had called it, and we were all sitting around the table, and the administrator, who had so much to do, and he came in with his laptop, he popped that open, and he was typing along while things are going on. And I noticed there were a couple of other computers out, and they were typing as well, and the pastor asked him a question, a direct question, and he didn't answer, and it was quiet. And of course that got his attention, and he said, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? And so the pastor repeated it, and everyone in the room was like, I can't believe you're such an idiot that you would do that. You know what? He should have been attentive, and it didn't serve him well. I mean, there's some trust that's broken, some confidence that's lost. When you come in ready to do whatever the business is, then we can do it. Yeah. But you're going to have to be attentive.
Speak. That's good. All right, so you say we should be prepared for the events and week-to-week activities. What do you mean by that?
Okay, now I believe that people are not preparing ahead. I'm seeing more and more ministers who are winging it. And when you wing it, you are not going to serve yourself well. You're going to be stressed, and your people are uninformed. And actually, it just isn't as good as it could be. So here's my challenge. We're putting up on our workroom wall of our department a complete calendar for the whole year. And we're writing in all the things for the whole year. This is what we're going to accomplish. This is what our budget is built around, are these things to accomplish and the objectives of why we're doing these things. Then we can work back a couple weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and talk about how we're going to market it or how we're going to promote it so that the word is out instead of like, oh, I forgot, can we get that in the bulletin? You know, it's not effective. Nobody's even reading the bulletin. I don't know why we print them. But we're losing it because we're not planning ahead very well. And the truth is, all of these event things, we could bring a team of parents together for each one, a whole different team, and they could learn to have buy-in with what's going on because you've involved them in the ministry, all the way to the decorating and getting this stuff and putting it out, and you could show up because you've got them involved. Parents don't necessarily want to teach because we're having a hard time finding teachers, but it may be that we haven't included them at all. Listen, it would be much easier just to plan it yourself and go get the supplies and do it. But if you plan farther out and you brought more of these parents along with you, you'd have more involvement, more buy-in. Doesn't matter what it is, you would have parent participation. And that's a big deal. So plan ahead. At least 2 months ahead would be the goal.
2 months ahead.
Yeah, I know. That's a stretch for somebody.
Now my youth minister friends are like, get out of here, Mr. Marr. Okay.
2 months.
I love this next one. We should care for our teammates and give affirmation for their good work.
Absolutely. Affirmation is probably one of the most powerful things that we could do. And that is that we would walk by someone's classroom or notice something and tell them later, way to go. Good job. You did a terrific thing. When I heard you say that, when I saw you love that child, when I saw you talk to this visitor, whatever it was, say it. We need to be dishing out that affirmation. Now, I've all seen, and you've done it too, the little candies that, you're worth a mint, whatever, and that's sweet. But it will have nothing compared to when you actually tell them, way to go. That was such a great job. I wished everyone could have seen what you did there. That is such incredible affirmation. It gives people the ability to take more risks, to try something. Listen, people who don't get affirmation, don't get any feedback from you, they don't know. Am I doing this right? Is this good? And so they pull back and they don't even try because they don't want to be criticized. They don't want to be judged like they did the wrong thing. And so people don't have that kind of confidence, and you've got to give it to them. And you're their leader. It would only make sense that you would affirm them.
Okay, the wisdom in this next one is a game changer for somebody who's listening today.
All right.
Here it is. We need to make our requests with details and not just big ideas. Now, somebody right here went, oh!
You're right. And I don't know how many times I've walked into my education minister's office, my supervisor, and said, hey, what if we did this? Or maybe we could get that. Wouldn't that be great? And he's like, yeah, I need some details though. Like, what's it going to cost? When will we get it? When will it be delivered? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, I need that. I was like, okay. So whenever you're walking in to make those big requests, if it's a finance committee or if it's just one person that approves that, if it's your team, they like your ideas, but at some point we got to have some details. So now I'm a big wow person, but I have people on my team who are selected because they're how people. So we have to have the wow and the how together in order to see something actually happen. You've got to get those details. So have the big ideas, dream the big dream. I mean, that's where it's really going to rock it. But you're going to have somebody push against you and invite them to say, okay, how can we do it? I mean, wouldn't that make a great book? The wow and the how.
I do. I agree. I was just thinking about that.
Book.
Wow.
I mean, every page, an event of wow and then how. We would all love that book.
Somebody needs to write it.
I'm working on it.
Okay. All right. Speaking of books, let's talk about this. You just released a book called Mojo, 31 Days to Finding Your Kidmin Mojo.
That's right.
All right. Talk to us about that.
31 Days to Finding Your Kidmin Mojo is about a challenge. It started like this. I had a pastor years ago that I went in and asked him, hey, could you just every now and then just let me know if I'm doing this well, if I'm doing it right? I need a little feedback. That'd be great. And he said, sure, as soon as I see something right, I'll tell you.
Oh,
Jeremy, guess how many times I heard from him? 0.
Oh, man.
None. And actually, when he left, I was okay with that because I didn't have any feedback. And when you don't have feedback, you don't know, am I doing this right? I mean, it feels right. It seems right. I have peace about it, but then there's no feedback. then you're the minister that starts trying to be a people pleaser, trying to get everybody just to like you. And then you're really creating a big problem, because if somebody doesn't like a decision you made, or they disapproved of something, you're crushed. And you don't really have your feet under you. I wanted ministers to be able to take for 31 days a little portion and read it and consider, am I right in this? Answer these 3 questions. Am I doing well? And be able to evaluate their ministry, get some practical ideas, and know that they have their feet under them. They're doing a good job.
I love that. Now, you also offer Mr. Mark's Classroom. Let's talk just a little about that so the children's ministers listening can take advantage of that.
Absolutely. And there's parenting things there as well. But MrMarksClassroom.com is really things that are happening in my own ministry in Oklahoma City. It's things that I'm writing, that I'm reading, that I'm practicing. And then we put all these ideas, these resources out for people to have for free. Now, I got to say, when I saw the Pioneer Woman start cooking in her kitchen, she's from Oklahoma, I thought, well, dadgummit, I could go to the resource room and we could start filming little video clips of how to make something or play this game or to do this activity, this Bible skill game. And you know what? It's just been a big hit. People have appreciated a little video clip of how to do that. And so then I already have started a podcast. I have over 100 different podcasts for training. There's resources on Wednesday that are given. Some are free, some are options to purchase, but most everything you're going to see on the website is free. Search it if you need a certain idea, because we're just I'm about resourcing teachers, leaders. I want everybody to have. It's kind of like a teacher swap shop. Wouldn't that be great?
I love that. All right. Well, you have been awesome, and I thank you. Wisdom, I could tell, experience brought wisdom, and you brought it to us today.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Mark. And if you guys, one more reminder, MrMarksClassroom.com. Go check it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
D6 Curriculum is a comprehensive discipleship strategy for all ages in your church. Solid biblical content teaches wise decision-making, and the curriculum emphasizes a biblical worldview. Each quarter of D6 Curriculum contains 3 studies, 1 Old Testament, 1 New Testament, and 1 special topic study addressing cultural issues, apologetics, and Christian living. D6 is great for use in life group, small group, or Sunday school. D6 Curriculum is affordable and easy to use. You can order teaching materials in print or digital format. See how D6 Curriculum gets every age on the same page at d6family.com.
All right, we're going to move from Mr. Mark Jones. Thank you, sir, for that wisdom. My favorite part of that whole thing, and I said it in the interview, is the whole laptops in the staff meetings. That is a huge pet peeve. I don't know how, and you run a lot of meetings, Ron, and I may get people in trouble here at D6, but when people are looking at their email and doing like laptops during a meeting, that's a little bit put off. It puts the boss off, doesn't it?
It does. In fact, we've had a standing policy that we do not allow laptops or electronics into our meetings.
There you go.
They can bring them in so that if we have a question, we can pause and go look something up, but they're not allowed to be open and operating on them.
So if you're in that habit, here's a loving push for you to from Mr. Mark to not do that. Now let's move. Our producer has a laptop right here, and he's now trying to close it. But this is different. This is different.
This is working.
So we are going to move now to Yancey Arrington and talk curriculum.
Yancey is, without a doubt, one of those minds where he analyzes, and he's a great speaker and communicator. He pastors Clear Creek Community Church. And one of the areas that he tackles, think about this, and he's going to describe this. Can you imagine analyzing in multi-levels of colors? Because when they get curriculum in and they're beginning to analyze it, Jeremy, they pull out the green highlighter, they pull out the yellow highlighter, they pull out the other, and they start highlighting different categories. And that's what he's going to explain to us on this segment. How do they look for key items that they want to see appear in curriculum before they choose it?
Wow, that sounds like a really cool thought. Let's listen now to Yancey and learn how to do that skill for ourselves.
We're sitting here with Yancey Arrington from Clear Creek Community Church. He's the teaching pastor and has served for 19 years in this role and was introduced to D6 and to myself by our friend we all know and love, Brian Haynes. Yancey's been married for 21 years. He has 3 boys, ages 16, 12, and 10. We are so thankful that you're part of the broadcast today. But Yancey, here's my question for you. Every time we get together, one of the topics that I know that you're very passionate about is making sure that what we teach people is very gospel-centric. In fact, our curriculum has often been compared to others, and they say, we love D6 curriculum because there's depth to it and there's not fluff, and that's usually the phrase that we hear. When people are evaluating curriculums, and I don't want us to center on ours, I just want us to talk through in general, what advice do you have for people to evaluate the curriculums that they are selecting and purchasing? How are they teaching from a gospel-centric aspect?
Yeah, first of all, Ron, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with the D6 family. Very grateful that Brian Haynes introduced me to you guys. I would say this. So every church, at least most churches I know, always have a question about their curriculum with their children's ministry and even student ministry and so on and so forth. And so what I try to do initially, what I've done with my church is we first try to talk about when we say gospel-centric or gospel-centered ministry or curriculum, that can be a buzzword. And so what we simply try to say is when something is gospel-centered, we're saying that the person and work and ministry of Jesus, specifically what he does for us through the cross, is the center theme of the Bible, and that anytime that we teach the scriptures in any format, whether it's Sunday morning in the pulpit or Sunday morning in Sunday school, or even in your home groups or small groups, that we're trying to show that Christ is the center of the scriptures. That's the main message, and that every other story within the Bible ultimately reveals the one big story. And so what I try to do with people is often what happens is, and this is very easy to see in children's ministry and children's curriculum, is that a lot of the curriculum that's sold is done so under the name that it's practical and that it's relevant and that it helps kids with their virtues and their values. And there's nothing wrong with virtues and values at all. I mean, there definitely is a Christian ethic when it comes to things like sexuality and how you relate to parents and honesty and so on and so forth. But I would argue those things flow out from an understanding of who Jesus is and what he's done. They're not equal to that, and I don't think many people would argue with that, although when you look at curriculum, there are times where it seems like the curriculum is pushing a behavioral model and not necessarily a gospel one. So, for example, what I try to do very practically is I tell people you ought to get 2 types of highlighters. Get a yellow highlighter and a green highlighter, and have the yellow highlighter represent the law, which means moral commands or imperatives that you want your children to do, that the curriculum is pushing, like, be nice to your mom and dad, always tell the truth, learn how to develop friendships. I mean, those are commands, those are laws. And then with the green marker, go through that same curriculum and find how much of that curriculum actually talks about Jesus and the goodness of the gospel, and how much of that behavior is tied to the gospel itself. And what is I can't speak for anyone else's experience, but for our experience, the curriculum that we were using, which I'm not going to tell everyone what it is, but needless to say, one of the more popular curriculums that churches use around the nation, we found out was full of yellow. In other words, it was full of moral commands, but it was very little on actually pointing people to Jesus, or even saying that Jesus is the reason for this kind of behavior. So that's a practical way that I've helped expose our church to, wow, maybe we need to re-examine the curriculum that we use. So that's one thing that we've done, Ron. I would also say that I know for many churches, including ours, and I serve at a large church. It's a multi-campus church. We have around 5,000 people on a weekend. Even as large as we are and as many resources that people might assume that we have, we don't want to write curriculum if we can help it. So I just try to help our church find curriculum that, nope, it's not perfect. There's not a perfect curriculum out there, but to adjust that curriculum in such a way that the gospel shines in that. And then if there are moral imperatives, which I hope that there are, that they're tied to a relationship with Jesus, that my kids, we're not teaching them to be kind and honest and pure because God will love them more if you do that, but they will be kind and honest and pure because God already loves them in Jesus. And that kind of change, that simple shift is, to me, a huge difference between maybe moralistically driven curriculum and gospel-driven curriculum.
Yes. So let me ask this. That's an ideal, and we teach people about how to evaluate curriculum as well. But I find pastors, especially of certain size churches, it can be smaller, it can be mid-size, and I found that it's not even representative of 50 to 75. I was in a mega church in Dallas recently, and one of the ministry leaders told me, says, I've got all of these professors from these seminaries sitting around teaching for us, and they want to teach only what they want to teach. And getting people on the same page of teaching a curriculum that is gospel-centered can be hard to do for a ministry leader. So how do you deal with the personalities when somebody's not ready to make that kind of change, and they've always been able to pick what they've wanted to teach?
Yeah. Well, to me, then the burden, that's a great question. To me, the burden is, what are you really getting if you teach a curriculum that's I don't want to say devoid of the gospel, that's really gospel light. So I try to show those guys, because I live in League City. Our main campus, if you will, our original campus is in League City, we're not even a mile away from NASA. So we have a lot of scientists and engineers and very heady, strong-headed people. And I say that in a very positive light. I mean, very intelligent. So I know that I have to convince them that the gospel is really the A to Z of the Christian faith and not the ABCs. And so I'm convinced you can teach on anything, and that it all leads us to the cross or leads from the cross. And so what I try to tell people is I'm not really actually trying to change the topics that we address. I'm trying to change the framework in which we address those topics. And so if we want to talk about with our children, our kids, how to be a good son or daughter in the family, or how to have good friendships for what the Bible says, I'm all for it. I just want to come from the right perspective, which is the gospel should frame those moral imperatives. Because if they don't, what comes across is moralism. And so I just try to tell all those guys that are like, man, I really want to teach what I want to teach. I try to help them see, if you don't see where the work of Christ comes into this, then really what you're giving them. And here's the question I really ask. I don't tell it. I just ask it. I said, how can you show me what you're giving them is no different with for example, with kids, what they get on Saturday morning cartoons, or the moral imperatives from their school teachers during the week? I mean, in other words, why did Jesus have to die for this curriculum to work? And if you don't have an answer for that, well, then I just don't think the job's done still.
Yeah.
Because I want my kids, and I have 3 boys, as you've mentioned, I want my children to walk through our children's ministry and student ministry and ultimately adult ministry, not just knowing what to do, but knowing whom to love.
Yeah.
And I want them with bigger hearts, not just bigger heads. And I think that's the power of the gospel.
That's awesome. Thank you for guiding us through that. I know there's a pastor out there going, yeah, but you don't know my person who's asking, or those preferences. And we always have the people who have strong-minded that it's all about them and not about the class they're teaching. And I think that's one of the paradigms we've got to change, to say you're called to teach.
I totally agree.
Yeah. So it's refocusing where we're going. I so appreciate what you're doing.
I thank you for that, Ron. What I would just say is this, and this is not, Ron's not asked me to do this. Ron was gracious enough years ago to send me sample curriculums from Randall House and their publishing house. And I was really, I was just really grateful for what you guys have done and the emphasis that you've brought. I mean, I know that you've shared with me, like, hey, we really try to work through talking about how gospel needs to be centered in this. And so, man, I just wish more publishing houses and curriculum houses would have that same kind of effect, because you don't lose anything, you only gain stuff. So I just appreciate y'all's commitment to that.
Wow, thank you. I was ready to wrap up until you went into that. Now I'll extend the time. I had no idea you were going to say that. Yeah, our philosophy has always been, since 15, 20 years ago, trace the messianic thread through Scripture. Always.
Absolutely.
Always.
Absolutely.
So that's what we say in our curriculum and our scope and sequence. So thank you, Yancey, for being on the D6 podcast. We so appreciate you, and we're praying for you, and we're championing the same items. Blessings to you.
Thanks, Ron. It's been a pleasure to be here. Blessings to you and the whole D6 family.
Well, we want to thank you guys for being with us for another episode of the D6 podcast. This thing only gets better and better, and it's all because of you guys.
Yeah, we thank you for listening. This is incredible. And as we look forward to next week, we're going to, Jeremy, I think you got an interview with Joshua Straub.
Yeah.
What an insightful guy. He is just... Man, his background in counseling, his speaking, but yet he's an incredible dad.
Yeah.
So he's going to be talking to us about ministering to military families. Is that right?
Yeah, a topic that most, some of you might be tempted to check out on. I'm going to beg you not to, because every church has military families or veterans in their church, and there are special needs that you can learn to meet. It's kind of like special needs ministry. There's a neat opportunity there, and he's going to talk to you about how to do that.
Absolutely, and his principles will apply. The same principles he's talking about will apply to people outside of the military for sure. Really insightful. And we're going to be talking to Kyle Eidelman about vulnerability. So great lineup. Two heavy hitters next week.
That makes me feel vulnerable, Ron, that we'll talk about.
Well, we got a week to work on that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. Hey, listen, if you have a chance, go to iTunes and rate us 5 stars. If you don't want to give us 5 stars, never mind. We thank y'all so much for being with us.
Be honest.
If you ever have anything you want to talk to us about, you can talk to us on Twitter at D6Leader. We'd love to check in with you. Hope you have a great week of ministry.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com. And if you're a minister, we invite you to join the D6 Leader Network by going to d6leadernetwork.com.